Hi, I'm indie fantasy author Melinda Kucsera, and in this episode of Fantasy Lore and More, Cady Hammer is joining me to talk about her book, Chasing Fae. So welcome, Cady, and tell me about Chasing Fae.
Hi, thank you so much for having me on today. I'm super excited to talk about my book with everybody. So Chasing Fae follows the story of a young mortal woman named Grace, whose only concerns in her young life are providing for her family, playing her violin, and spending as much time as possible with her older brother, Leo. And Leo goes into service in the Fae's world as a mercenary, and she expects him to return home with kind of all of the honor and accolades that he deserves. But when he suddenly dies in a mysterious accident, not a word, a medal, or any financial support for the funeral comes down from the Fae realm. And there's also no body. So she suspects that there's some foul play going on here. So Grace decides she's going to disguise herself as a Fae and sneak into their world to get some answers. She anticipates, being well in over her head, but what she doesn't anticipate is being caught on the first day by a Fae soldier. And now she's forced to drag him along because he takes a liking to her story and what her goals are. And so she's got to drag along this man with her as she tries to work out exactly how and why her brother died. And along the way, she has to confront a lot of her own prejudices about the Fae and sort out the differences between who's telling the truth and who's not. There's political conspiracies and demon realm escapades and family secrets that will all lead her to the answers that she's looking for, as well as some that she isn't.
Oh, wow. Is this contemporary fantasy, or is this like high fantasy?
This is high fantasy. This is that that epic sweeping quest type thing, and then the world has some contemporary elements to it, but it definitely falls more into since most of the story takes place in the upper realm, which is the Fae's world. It definitely has that more epic fantasy sort of medieval fantasy vibe.
And so Grace's world is sort of like ours then.
A little bit, I would say. I designed the mortal world to be sort of kind of 20th century technology. Nothing that was too like super advanced, but enough to kind of take care of the modern conveniences type of thing.
Oh, okay. So we're not using the outhouses here. We've got
yes, exactly
some modern not luxuries, but some modern conveniences. Cool. Do you want to go into the excerpt?
Yes, I do. I'd love to.
Awesome.
So I'm going to read my first chapter for you all. So I'm just going to go ahead and get started from there. Chapter 1. Everyone's time runs out eventually. Sometimes it comes quietly in the middle of the night at the end of a long life. Other times, death cuts across your timeline without warning. Today just happens to be my time. No, I'm not dead, but this is the end for me. It's a week before the winter solstice, which has always been one of my favorite times of the year. A full feast on the table, as large as money can buy, music pouring out of the windows of every building in Lisbon, and family to spend the day with. Mom's been accumulating canned vegetables for weeks and recently ventured into the market to bring home the best of the fresh fruits in a small bag. My mouth waters just thinking about the blackberries. We never get blackberries in this part of the Middle Realm outside of solstice time. They're one of my favorite treats. My older brother Leo is due to be home any day now. He's been gone for 6 months, off on another of his mercenary expeditions. One more assignment, he said, and then he would be home for the winter solstice. Just one more assignment, and he'd bring me back something nice for the celebration. Just one more assignment. I was lying in bed when it happened. It was late morning, not late enough to be noon, but not early enough to have time to get things done. I'd been awake for hours, but I like to lie in bed and just think. Sometimes I'd read, but today I couldn't get myself to focus. Leo was due home in a week, and I was expecting a letter from him soon. He hadn't written in a few days. I figured the letters must be backed up. Communication in between realms is rare and therefore not always speedy, but had an awful sense of foreboding. When Leo decided to become a soldier, my mother and I were both terrified. She tried to respectfully talk him out of it, whereas I threw a fit and stormed out. I was just scared. Anything can happen out on the roads in this realm. He could have been sent to a peaceful town, or he could have been sent south to the farm country where they're fighting for whatever scraps they can get and they don't care who gets killed. But he held out against both of us, started training the day he turned 18 and never looked back. I was 16 and he was 19 when he was first hired to run security out in the trading ports of Bay Point. We cried when he left home, promising to be home in the spring. but we rejoiced when he sent home his first paycheck and we could afford new clothes and fresh fruit from the market. Leo sent every copper outside of his expenses home to us. He had always said he wanted to take care of us someday, like Mom had for all these years on her own, and finally he had the chance. Leo bounced around from job to job until 6 months ago when he was summoned to City Hall with the other mercenaries in his company. We all thought maybe the government wanted to offer him a job, but no, it was the higher-ups, the Fae. The Fae have always had a hand here in the Middle Realm. They control the alliances, the trade, and the resource distribution. They all sit up there in the upper realm in their fancy castles and their bountiful homes with their magic and just watch us all run around down here like ants. This time, the Fae needed their worker ants, a group of mortal soldiers, to come run security for a top-secret operation of the House of the Sun. They offered more money than anyone in this realm had ever even heard of, and of course, Leo jumped at the chance. I have never seen him prouder to serve, and Leo could never resist an adventure. A knock from the front door echoes faintly under my bedroom door, interrupting my thoughts. I pull the covers over my head in hopes I can stay in bed. "Will you see who that is, Grace?" My mom's faint voice calls from the kitchen. Ugh, she knows I'm awake. I grab a robe and begrudgingly drag myself out of bed, stumbling to the door. I peer out of the hole in the top of the door and am faced with the back of a strange man's head. Behind him stand 2 other men. They stand rigidly at attention, mumbling quietly to one another. The leader's stance, along with the navy blue uniforms, marks him as a military man. Then I see his slightly pointed ears sticking out from under his rigid hat. My heart stops. Fae. No. He turns slowly, and I see his face. His skin glows with an unseen light, and his purple eyes seem to bore into mine. It is as though he can see me through the heavy door. Perhaps he can. His features are too bright for this realm. His mouth is drawn tightly in a slight grimace, and I can't bear to think what that means. "Mom?" I can't hide the panic in my voice. I hear a dish clank into the sink as my mom rounds the corner in a rush. I feel guilty for making her worry before she even saw what the trouble was, but my face says it all. She peeks through the hole herself before opening the door. She opens it so slowly, delaying the inevitable. As the soldiers take a step forward into the doorway, I can now see that the leader is a Fae commander. The medals lining his breast and the swirling insignia marks him as such. His guards stand behind him. One of them holds a tightly wrapped scroll. The other holds the universal upper realm flag neatly folded in his hands. I stand behind my mother, staring blankly at the lot. I can't bring myself to move. "I'm sorry," the commander says quietly. My mother collapses to the ground, and I just let her fall. She sobs wildly into her hands as the panic rises up in my chest. I reach out and take the scroll and the flag, shaking my head over and over again. This can't be real. I tear open the scroll, ripping it violently in my attempts. Leo Richardson, notice of death. I drop the flag and it hits the ground with a soft thunk. The soldiers startle when it hits the ground, but the commander stops them from moving into our home to retrieve it. Thank the lady for that, at least. I would have charged them both if they had tried. Damn them. Damn all the Fae. I kneel at my mother's side and pull her to my chest as she begins to wail. I haven't even begun to cry yet. I cling to her as tightly as I can, trying to shush her before the neighbors come to see what is going on. Our pain should be ours, not a spectacle for others to gawk at. I stare up at the Fae commander with what I hope is some sort of dismissive glance. His even gaze looks down on me, and when we lock eyes, I am filled with a blinding hatred. "Get out," I hiss. To my surprise, he only nods, and he and his men turn and leave immediately. I wonder how many death announcements he has had to carry out in his life. It may explain the flash of pity I thought I saw behind his glassy demeanor. I despise his pity. I see the flash of a maroon coat before my Uncle Liam is kneeling by our sides. His door down the hall makes an audible click as it swings closed. "Grace, what happened?" He hugs my mother protectively before addressing her. "Anna, what happened?" My mother is too incoherent to answer, and I can't find the words. I slide the scroll over to him slowly. Liam takes one look at it, and his breath rushes out in one go. "Oh, Grace." He hugs my mother tighter and holds out an arm to me. I lean my head into his hand for one small moment until it is too much. "Take care of her," I say quickly as I flee to my room. I'm being selfish, I know it, but I can't take the pounding in my head. I slam the door and begin to pace the room. The sunlight streaming in through the window is too bright, too perky for the moment. I try to yank the curtains closed, but the heavy fabric tumbles off the wall, causing more light to break through. I have no patience for this. My hands tighten in my hair as I look for somewhere to hide. I catch a glimpse of the clothing shoved under my bed, and a rush of emotion hits me all at once. I dive to the floor and reach far underneath my bed. Rummaging through my things, I search for the one box that has... There! I rip the lid off of the jewelry box and throw it across the room. It hits the bookshelf and ricochets off the wall. I cringe and reach to get it, but I stop short when I see the tiny seashell bracelet lying in the case, curled up in the corner. My hands shake as I pull it out of the box. I toy softly with the pure white shell in the end as I finger the smaller shells lining the string. It was the very last gift I received from Leo. He brought it home to me from the beach on his last mortal assignment in Bay Point. I can't even bring myself to put it on. I finally try to slide it on my wrist, but it falls to the ground. I pick it up and try again, but my shaking fingers just can't hang on to it. Finally, my tears come. I scream in my grief, crying out Leo's name to the heavens and praying the lady will see him safely to the afterlife. I cradle the bracelet to my chest and rock back and forth as I sob and heave for breath. Come home, Liam. Come home, Leo. Please come home. You can't be dead. You're coming home, Leo. I need you to come home. Big brother, please. Please. I cried for a very long time. I don't remember much else of that day or that week for the matter. I can't stand the wintertime now. Too cold, too dark, too empty. And that is my preview for you all today.
Oh, wow. That was a lot.
Yeah. A lot happens in that first chapter.
Is that the whole first chapter, or is that just part of it?
That is the whole first chapter. Yes.
That's hard. I mean, I lost my sister almost 10 years ago. So like, yeah, I know what she is feeling.
That's true. I probably should have included a trigger warning for people who this is such a grieving chapter in the beginning. This is one of the more heavy moments. There are a couple of others throughout the book, but this is the moment where things fall apart in that first initial announcement. So that is something for me to remember next time.
It's not like most people haven't lost a sibling. It's kind of a uniquely devastating experience. It's definitely not something that like is the norm, but yeah, I know what she is feeling. The senselessness. My sister also was away when she passed away.
I'm sorry to hear that.
Have any answers, and there was a body. There was that, but obviously we couldn't see it till after the autopsy and all that, and then I went to the funeral home, and that took some time, so it just didn't feel real. It seemed like a nightmare that I just couldn't wake up from. Like, this is not actually real. If I could just wake up, you know, she'd be at my door asking to borrow this, that, or the other thing, or, oh, I borrowed this and now it's broken. I'm really sorry. I'll get you another one type, as sisters do. But no, we never got to have that sisterly quarrel ever again. Yeah, it's, oh, now I'm tearing. It's bringing it all sort of back.
I'm sorry for your loss.
No, it's okay. I mean, I knew going into this, but like, I didn't think it would hit me as hard. So no trigger warning was needed, because I did read I sent you Sona, so I had read that was part of it.
Yeah.
Let's move on from the death into let's talk about about Grace herself and the Fae realm. And so like, how do they go from their world to the Fae realms?
So Leo's best friend David is also a friend of Grace's, and he is secretly working for the black market. They run underground trade between the upper realm and the middle realm. Upper realm is Fae, middle realm is the mortal realm, and then the lower realm is the demon realm.
I see.
Yes, and so there is a magical barrier between realms. But if you catch has been magic smuggled back and forth in small doses across the line. So David brings Grace some specific tools that are going to help her break through that barrier just for a couple of seconds of a window in order to slip through to the other side. And so that's how that plays out. And then she finds herself in the upper realm where the majority of the story takes place.
And what is that world like, that upper realm?
Oh,
Are they on the same landmass, or like
I always wrote it as kind of these three parallel realms where they are kind of stacked on top of each other, but it's not like a horizontal line between borders. It's more of like a metaphorical like stacking of realms. And the upper realm was so much fun for me to put together. I spent like 8 months doing world building on just the Fae realm because I really wanted to capture all these little details that I saw in my head. It's one of my favorite parts of the writing process. And so in the upper realm, it definitely has that very fantastical feel with kind of medieval history weaving into it. And the realm is split into the 12 noble houses. And those are pretty much 12 miniature kingdoms within this space. And so let me see if I can do them off the top of my head. I haven't done this in a while. So we've got House of the Sun, House of the Moon, House of the Day, and House of the Evening, House of Light, House of Darkness, House of Water, House of Fire, House of Wind, House of the Earth, House of Peace, and House of War. Yes, that's all 12. Perfect.
Oh, wow.
Yes. And I picked those. I picked those because I really liked the idea of doing 12 in terms of the 12 signs of the zodiac. That's something that has inspired a lot of like my earlier work, which was, when I was kind of experimenting as a high schooler and as a young college student. And I liked looking at those to decide, character personalities and certain traits, finding things that matched. And so once I came up with that 12 number, there was no going back, which my writer self later regretted as I was, making sure that each individual section was distinct from another. And so across Chasing Fae and across the rest of the trilogy, readers pretty much get to see all 12 houses at some point, or have at least an inkling of those houses across all the books in the series.
Oh, wow. And since you brought it up, how many books are in the series?
Okay, so it is a trilogy, and so there are 3 books, and it is complete. The last one came out in December of 2022. There's also a short story collection companion to it, which is also out. That came out second in terms of the order, but it can be read really at any point after the first book. And then I'm hoping to do a second short story collection at some point in the next couple of years, because I have a couple more tales that I'd like to tell in that universe.
Oh, wow. So, all right. So we've got the completed thing. So,
yes.
So what are you writing now then, if this is completed? Because it's completed in 2022.
Yes.
And we're now in 2024. So.
Yes, we're at the beginning of 2024, which is crazy. So I have a second series that's currently in process. It's called the Ivy Labyrinth series. And that is a alternate Earth young adult fantasy that follows 4 high school students as they are called upon to enter the mysterious Ivy Labyrinth that has been wreaking havoc on the rest of the world in terms of magical mishaps and ricocheting off of things and causing natural disasters around the world. And these 4 are the latest round of people to enter the labyrinth and try to get through to the center to break its hold on the universe. So that is that series. That has 2 volumes out. And the third one is in progress. And then I have the beginning of a new series coming out, hopefully in the next couple of months, most likely March, is a fairy tale retelling series. It's going to be 9 standalone books in the same universe. And this first one is called Ashes and Arrows, and it's a Robin Hood retelling that I'm very excited about.
Oh, that's so cool. I love
Yeah.
Robin Hood stories. That's so fun. So, all right, back to Chasing Fae, which is the first book in the what is the trilogy? Does it
It's
have
just
a
the Chasing Fae trilogy is the name
oh
of
the
that one.
Chasing? Okay, no, that's cool. That's cool. So in so you were telling us about the Fae realm and like what it's like. You said it's very fantastical. What is the magic system like in this trilogy?
So I also spent quite a bit of time working on the magic system, as this was kind of my first large scale fantasy project. I wanted to make sure that the magic system made sense. So I did a lot of research into different types of magic systems and the kinds of things that they included. I'm opening up my notes from the magic system so magic power comes from fae or a demon's very soul. So a magic user essentially feeds the spell with their own willpower. The magic that's present in the general world is, unlimited, but the magic that's inside of an individual person can, in fact, run out. It can usually be recharged with rest or sleep, or if you use too much too quickly, the magical user can become unconscious or in temporary or in permanent cases, in some cases, death. The Fae are born with a certain number of inherent magical gifts or types of magic that they have a greater affinity for. That is called the inherent magic. But the noble families, the noble Fae, are born with a larger number of inherent gifts because this was the families were kind of a predestined type thing. These families have been around for generations and generations, going back to the creation of the upper realm itself. While Fae can learn other types of magic that they don't have this natural affinity for, it takes years and years of study to perfect those talents, and even then, most Fae cannot channel powers that they don't originally have kind of at birth. And so there's a bunch of different types of magic. Some of the things, is like, elemental magic, disintegration, animation, bringing objects, to life, energy manipulation. One of my favorite types is called empathetic magic, which is a type where you can tap into people's feelings and make them feel things through sometimes it's through just listening, sometimes it's through it's through artwork. You can weave magic into artwork, and music can trigger these things as well. That's one of the more unique ones that I came up with.
That's really cool.
Thank you.
And like so you said that her friend David has bits of magic. So if the magic has to come from within the Fae, how can someone take
because there are certain things that items that can be created can be imbued with certain types of magic. In this case, it's usually in the form of potions. It's usually when it's in its most condensed form is usually in potions, which are very rarely but still occasionally smuggled across realm lines.
So there's no magic in the middle world.
No, there's not. It's entirely mortal, and essentially the history is that the first mortals were born as Fae without magic. You had kind of that mishap, that different alignment in DNA, and then once that began to grow, once that phenomenon began to grow, the Fae were concerned about this, particularly once mortals started marrying Fae and having half-Fae children. And so the middle realm was created to separate the mortal world from the Fae world and prevent any further dilution of the purely magical race, essentially.
Is that the only difference between the inhabitants of the mortal world and the Fae world? Is that the Fae have magic and the mortals don't?
There are a few physical characteristics differences. The Fae obviously are characterized by that kind of pointed ear shape, the brighter skin. There are a few physical differences, but the primary difference is the magic versus lack of magic, for sure.
So do the Fae live longer lives than the people in the mortal realm?
Yes, typically, yes, they do. It's not somewhere where immortality is, that there is a large population of immortality, but it's more that because of their magic, it fuels them for longer. So you have people living maybe 100 to 200 years versus, 70 to, 80 years, that kind of thing.
Oh, that's really cool. And then you say, and so then when Grace goes over there, what does she find? Like,
she is blown away by just the sheer abundance of the world to start with. You can feel there's a different energy between the two spaces, and it's not just the magic. Something about the mortal realm I wrote to be very, very neutral, very gray, particularly Lisbon, where Grace is from, is this kind of very gray industrial type city. And she steps over into this, nature filled, open villages with, farmers markets, winding through the streets, and just this electricity in the air that she's really never felt before. So she immediately runs across, stepping over, finds that there is a huge difference to what she expected and to what she is now entering into. And she also figures that out pretty quickly, as in her attempts to find more information, she is caught and has to outrun some people who are chasing her before she is randomly rescued by this Fae soldier whose name is Aiden, who then listens to her story and joins her on her quest across the upper realm.
oh wow. So okay, so why would the Fae want like immortal, like her brother, to fight for them, and who are they fighting against?
Now, this is something that I don't want to give too much away because it is
Okay.
very, but what I can say is that the mercenaries weren't in fact called for a specific fight. Instead, they were called as guards, and guards of something very specific and very special that is a huge underlying factor, not just in the first book but in the rest of the series. And it's very interesting how that piece of it came to be, because mortals were used perhaps because the Fae didn't want other Fae to figure these things out. So they didn't want their own community members guarding whatever they were guarding.
Okay. So they needed humans.
They needed mortals for that kind of deniability type thing. And that is, I don't want to give too much away, so that's where I'll leave that.
Okay. And like, so they're not, so he was just there to guard something, not to fight anything.
Yes. And but for those readers who do like that, the fighting against something particular in their fantasy, there is plenty of that later in the series.
And who are they fighting later in the series?
So there are, one of the things that is an underlying theme throughout the stories is the political turmoil and the conflict in the upper realm. So the 12 houses are split into two different alliances. You've got the Alliance of the Rose and the Alliance of the Lily. And it's a pretty even split, essentially along the yin and yang lines of the matching pairs. So water and fire, earth and wind, evening and day, things like that. And so there's an undercurrent of these alliances have existed for hundreds and hundreds of years, and they pretty much haven't, been deviated from. But a few people within one of these alliances decided they want to break free from those and start operating for their own interests, and that's kind of upsets this delicate balance that the upper realm has functioned under for this period of time. And that disruption comes at a very large surprise to the rest of the realm, and it's going to kickstart war, particularly in the second book.
Oh, okay. You mentioned like that there's the Fae, there's the upper realm, then there's the humans, non-magical folk who are in the middle realm, and then there's this like lower realm where there's the demons. What differentiates the demon from the Fae?
So one of the things that differentiates this is control over magic. There are different ages of demons determine kind of the level of power and the level of control over that power. The younger demons it's where you have this uncontrollable magic. It's so much more powerful than the Fae, but they can't control it at all. So you have they often, end up fighting each other in these random, magical outbursts. And so that's why they've been confined to this lower realm, to keep them away from everybody else. It took a massive amount of power in order to do that. That's actually one of that lore is told early on, I believe early on in the first book, and is kind of added to throughout the 3 books. But the part of it's the unpredictability. Part of it is the sentient nature. There are some demons who are centuries and centuries old who have I guess I would say cognizance, and can communicate with each other, and can understand sort of their own actions. But most demons don't live that long, because they die when they're young and fighting with uncontrollable power.
Oh, okay. So it's like prison. So they're like locked in there. So they can't. So
they cannot cross.
So we don't see any of them in the story. We just hear about them.
Well, not exactly. There are. Yes, the demon realm exists in this story for a reason, and there is interplay across the 3 books in the lore realm.
Okay. That's interesting. And what is the demon realm like? Do we get to see it?
Yes, you do get to see it, and it is a pit of blackness. There is, interestingly enough, there is life there outside of demons. There are, there is, a dark wooden forest that goes, with bare trees that pretty much goes on for miles and miles and in opposite directions, with not a lot of like specific feature differences between there. There's, it's got this reddish grayish sky that kind of sheds this cloud over the entire place, and it's really devoid of most things, except for a few key landmarks, the demons themselves, and some secrets that are revealed throughout the series.
Oh wow, that's wild. So going back to our Fae, so they've split into 2 factions, and there's a third one that they just want to be on their own. Is there anything else that they want?
There's motivation for this. The house that is driving this fracturing of alliances has actually essentially reached across the aisle. And you have people who are working together across alliance and forming their own kind of mini thing, and it primarily has to do with land and with power. The house in question, who's leading this whole thing, is a very technologically advanced house. It is kind of on par with the technological advancements in the mortal realm. They have spent their time kind of branching out and seeing what the merge between magic and technology can be. But but all of this work that they've been doing, they do not have adequate farmland to feed their people. So they are heavily reliant on imports from nearby houses. And so, and it's one of the largest of the houses. People are hungry, and the leader of the house sees an opportunity to remedy these problems by starting to take over additional land. So that's kind of where this plays out. It has a lot to do with, it's got to do with land, it's got to do with power, and supposedly the protection of the people. And readers will see how that plays out over time, and what other motivations might be lurking underneath the surface.
Oh wow. And then in the mundane world, the middle world, So like, so you said most of it takes place in the Fae realm, so we don't see a lot of the middle realm in there.
There are pieces across books 1 and I think book 3 as well. I don't fully remember if book 2 also has. I don't believe so.
Okay.
But there are moments and chapters that are set in the middle realm to give more of a glimpse of what that looks like, of how the mortal realm functions differently from the Fae realm, the things that the Fae perceive about the mortal realm, having never stepped foot into it, because only people who really cross the border are usually government officials who are stopping in, checking in on different things to make sure that, you know, the mortal realm is kept in check. And this is because there is active trade between the middle realm and the upper realm, because the middle realm has the majority of the salt mines. And so there is it's a very heavily one-sided trading deal, let's just say. The Fae do keep a very tight leash on things, just, you know, installing their own, you know, political appointees in different cities, you know, making sure that the, you know, I wouldn't say they trade. It's not that they trade super lopsided, but it's definitely not an even exchange to keep people underneath their purview, essentially.
Okay. And so I guess there's not any political issues in the middle realm or any.
There are not usually any, because the Fae have made it so.
Okay. So
that there won't be.
Okay, so they have done. Okay, so all the issues are in the Fae realm.
Yes, all of the political issues there, mostly because the Fae have very specifically curated the middle realm's leadership to make sure that there isn't any conflict.
I see. And like, so if they need something from the middle realm, they know it will be available, because there's not going to be strife. There's not going to be disruptions.
And when it comes to confrontation, the magic versus non-magic is going to be a difficult battle to win in the first place. So the Fae don't worry as much about the middle realm when it comes to these things, because they don't see a reason to.
I see. So what about the fact that like potions and other things like this black market, like how do the Fae view that, and how much effect does that have on the middle realm?
So the black market, this is something that I loved writing, because the undercurrent that flows from the upper realm to the middle realm is also flowing fully in the upper realm as well. So we're talking about items being able to be moved from place to place without going through traditional trade networks. It's in the middle realm. It has a lot of it distributes a lot of additional crops and food to the middle realm that normally would be at shorter supply or inaccessible because of the trade agreements between the upper realm and middle realm. So there's this, while it is kind of seedy and it can be dangerous to deal with, there's also this kind of this positive impact that it has on the middle realm. And the Fae are aware that these things occur, but they've never really been able to tap into who is involved at any given time. They, you know, there's pockets that get caught, you know, every once in a while, but there are people at the top and who are responsible for the functioning of the black market are in very high places and know a lot more and are able to keep operations moving smoothly without too much interference. I don't want to go farther than that, because it's a very important when you find out who the leader of the black market is, it's a very important component to kind of book 1 transitioning into book 2.
I see. And so Grace's brother, it sounds like it was very lucrative for him to go and work in the Fae realm.
It's one of the few things that it's one of the few opportunities that was really ever offered to, and certainly the first opportunity that people of Grace and Leo's generation would have ever heard of, to be able to step foot into the upper realm as a mortal because most of that trading happens at the border. So to actually be able to physically step into the Fae realm was completely unheard of. And the money that they were offering would change lives. And so that's why he goes, is because he wants to support his family.
Does like if you spend a lot of time in the Fae realm and you're from the Middle Realm and you don't have magic and you're in this very magic fantastical place, does that change you?
Not in the way that I think you're implying in terms of physical changes or magical changes, but there is, I would say that there is, I mean, there's caution to be had, because at one hand you're in this amazing new place where everything you've really ever dreamed of is happening. And for someone who's an adventure seeker like Leo, this would have been perfect for him to like just be able to see kind of what that other side of things looks like. At the same time, though, there are little protections for a mortal against Fae in the middle realm, and even less so in the upper realm, where things aren't necessarily regulated against, you know, Fae and mortal, because mortals don't usually cross over. So there's not a lot of interplay that happens within the upper realm itself. So it's a very interesting dynamic.
So like, if he hadn't died, like, would he have gone back to the middle realm? And like, if he had, like, how would that have affected him? Like, he just going from this fantastical place back to this grayer, drearier
that would have been, I think it would have been very interesting to see how that would have played out if he hadn't died before he could make it back. I believe that based on the character, I believe that he would have, part of him would have been satisfied with that and really wanted to be home with his family. His family was always his primary concern. But I think there would have been that little part of him that would miss it enough to wonder what it would be like going back. And he may have ultimately joined his friend in that black market underground trade, just to have some sort of connection, even if he couldn't cross over again, just to have some sort of connection to that magic and that intrigue that exists in the upper realm.
Oh, that's cool. So he would have been able to like fit back into the middle world.
He would have fit back into it, but I think it would be highly possible that he would have kept some ties through the black market to at least, you know, have some interaction with some of that magic and some of that energy that he fell in love with when he was there.
Yeah. And now that Grace has crossed over, is she like, would she be able to go back to the middle realm after all that she experiences in the Fae realm?
That's where it gets interesting, because going in, she doesn't expect to come back at all. She expects to avenge her brother's death and die in the process, essentially. She knows that the chances of her returning to the middle realm are very slim. Which is also a very interesting dilemma for her, this inner turmoil of having left her mother now without both her children. And
how's her mother going to survive, like, without them? Like,
she leaves, I will say she does leave in the first few chapters before she crosses over. She does leave a note for her uncle, who is her mother's brother, and who lives that's Liam, who lives on the other end of the hall. She writes a note to him as well and says, "Hey, I've got to go do this. I'm not going to tell you. I can't tell you all the details because I don't want to put you in danger, but please take care of my mom, as I likely won't be back." And so it's a very, that comes up quite a bit of her. There is, despite her kind of this all-consuming need to go figure out what happened and to get revenge and to make sure that her brother is honored and avenged appropriately, there is this lingering guilt that she feels for having left her mother behind, having, you know, thought, even though she sees it as, you know, thinking of Leo, and she knows deep down that she's thinking a little bit more of herself as well, that this isn't just for him, this is for her healing as well, which is both somewhat beneficial to her, but also somewhat maybe not the best methods for her as well.
Wow.
Yeah.
And well, we'll have to wait and see why Aiden decides to help her, what his deal is.
Yes. He's a fun character too.
Yes, oh, really?
Yes, he's a fun character. I enjoyed writing him. There are quite a few characters that she meets along the way that have presence across all three books that are very influential, not just to the quest, but also to her as a person. And so I love, that's something I also love about the writing process, is getting to write characters that are just really influential on each other, I think it's really cool to explore the interplay between, you know, how personality mesh or clash in order to like bring out new emotions and new ideas in people. I think that's a very real concept to write about. So that's one of the things that I enjoy doing kind of in that character building process, is looking for those, where are those moments of, you know, clarity, and where are those moments of friction that I can, you know, really exploit to bring out something new in a scene.
Yeah, that is fun when you can do that.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you want to say about Chasing Fae or the sequels?
I would say that while the first book focuses heavily on the quest aspects, books 2 and 3 definitely get even deeper into the upper realm and the lore and the history and the politics. And so it's got a little bit of everything for people who like that kind of a book, where there's a little bit of questing, there's some romance, there's some political intrigue, there's war, there is some deep diving into the magic and how the magic works, particularly in book 2. And so if any of that sounds like something you'd like, I definitely think that this is a good series to try out, because it really does. It captures a lot of the things that I personally love in fantasy books, and that's one of the things I like. I wanted to write something that I would also love to read.
No, it sounds like a really cool trilogy, and the short story anthology that you have, are those about Grace or about like other characters or other things in the world?
So the short story collection is called Chasing the Past, and this dives into looking at some of the characters who have influenced Grace's life in various ways, and it's looking at their past and seeing how that influences Grace both in the present and in the future. So it is definitely something that you want to read. It's definitely something to pick up after you read the first book. The first book because there are a few key spoilers in the short story collection that it's important that you have the context of the first book for. But it plays around with characters that have influenced her, both as a child. There is a story from her mother that was a really poignant tale for me to tell, as well as seeing her mother in this younger, more lively and vibrant state before her, you know, her eldest son dies. And I really wanted to capture I really liked capturing that moment of her, so people can see her in this totally different light than what the book shows, which I think was super interesting to do. So that's kind of where the short story collection fits into the series.
No, it's cool. And you said you want to do another short story collection.
Yes.
And what sort of stories might we expect in there?
Those will be definitely more some of those I hope that will be more of the moments you didn't catch in books 2 and 3, kind of the things that were mentioned but not necessarily like shown out in its full form. I'd like to do some of those, you know, unwritten scenes, writing them out finally. I have a couple of ideas for sort of those, you know, what if this had occurred instead of this other action. That one's definitely still a work in progress. I have a short list of things that I want to look at and see which ideas are the best. But that's the kind of vibe that I'd be going for in the second collection.
That sounds like fun. Sometimes those what ifs can be really like interesting.
Absolutely.
And you don't always get that. Like, there's not a lot of series out there. I can't really think of any others that have sort of what if stories. I'm sure there are. They're just not coming to my mind.
It's funny. I will be honest here, and I will admit that some of those what ifs are ties back to my fan fiction reading days. I'm like, there is definitely a couple of moments that if I was a reader reading this, I'd be like, I need a fanfic of that. And that is kind of that scene. There's a couple of those scenes that I figure I would kind of kick off and get started in terms of, you know, those what if moments.
I see. So that's really cool.
Thank you.
That's neat. Like, so instead of somebody else writing the fanfic, you're writing it as an actual story.
Because there are certain moments that I think
and you're making it canon.
That would make it canon. That was kind of the motivation behind some of the ideas for for that second short story collection, because I was like, there were moments that, I would have loved to include, X, Y, or Z. I would have loved to have seen this section. I would have loved to have seen, more from these two characters together, or this secondary character romance that no one ever really, like, there was really only mentioned very brief moment, but if we, recenter the story around them, suddenly kind of the world opens up a bit more. As that's the kind of thing that I would be aiming for in that second collection.
I see. And all the stories in both anthologies. Yes, that's the word.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's all canon.
Yes, it is. Yes. Anything that would be canon would be specifically marked by me as canon. The only time I would mark something as a what if would be the couple that I have in mind of like things that definitely didn't happen because it conflicts directly with the plot, but instead, approaching it from a different angle. But the rest, the majority of it, minus maybe one or two short stories, are 100% canon. Everything in Chasing in the past is canon as well.
That's really cool. I think that's so neat that like you're writing, and instead of waiting for someone to write a fanfic about this, like I'm just gonna write it myself.
Oh yeah, it's funny because I love reading fanfic, but it's not something that I ever dived into writing growing up. I thought about it, but I was always too nervous to do so. So I figured this would be my mini foray into that world a little bit.
But it's not fanfic because you're writing it and it's your world.
Yes, but I'm hoping, I will say, I think that I will have made it as an author when somebody writes fanfic about my story, even if it's just like a couple of short paragraphs. I would absolutely adore that. That's probably the moment where I'd be like, you know what, I'm good with that. Like I can ride on that for the rest of my author career.
That's so cool. You mentioned that you like fan fiction. What do you have, like a particular favorite?
For favorite story, I would say no, but I will admit.
How does it work? Like fandom, or like I don't read fan fiction only because I didn't know it existed.
Or fandom or certain ships. I will admit, probably for the first time on camera here, that I am a huge fan of the Draco and Hermione pairing, the Hermione fanfic community. I have read a lot of work in that realm, but that is 100% because I am a sucker for the bad boy and the good girl trope. It's something that comes up in my stories. It's something that comes up in pretty much the majority of the books that I pick up at the bookstore are going to cover kind of that range in every guise that you can really come up with that. I like the, he's a dick to everybody but her kind of a deal. And there's something about that I find that very, very interesting to read and to play around with. So it's definitely a theme that comes up in a lot of my stories, not just this series, but future ideas that I have as well.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
So that's really cool. Yeah. I've heard of fan fiction, but I've not.
It's a rabbit hole unless you're prepared. I personally wouldn't go jumping into it because I haven't read in a while. It's been a couple of years since, but every once in a while, like every year and a half or so, I'll go on a binge. I'll be like, oh, I remember that story. I'm gonna go back and read that, and then I'll be reading nothing but fan fiction for a month, and in between classes, and I won't be writing, I'll just be reading. So I try to stay on the outside now of the fanfic world because I get sucked in way too easily by different stories.
That's really neat.
Yeah.
That's really cool. I'm not really a big romance reader, so I think that's why I never got into reading fan fiction, because a lot of it is shipping different characters. A lot of it is
romance based.
Yeah, and if you're not into romance, then it's
I will say I have read some really good drama or thriller style fanfics in certain fandoms that don't focus as much on the romance that I've enjoyed. So it's a much smaller kind of niche within that world. But it's definitely, well, as you'll say, if there's any piece of media out there, there's definitely a fanfic of it somewhere. You just got to know where to look.
Right. No. Yeah, no, I don't like I like books that are very heavily action. Like if there's any sort of romance, it's off page, off screen. It's mentioned one
Totally fair.
time in one section sentence.
Totally fair.
But like most readers are not me. So yeah, I want all the action. I want all of that. But yeah, so that's why I never like I always equated fan fiction with like it's romance. And I'm like, it's not really my thing.
It's definitely heavy leaning towards
yeah.
But there are a few gems in there for sure.
Oh no, I know that there's a lot of amazing writing in there. There's been amazing books that started as fan fiction
100%.
And then became original works. So yeah, I don't doubt that there's some really amazing things in there, and like, you know, I hope that people find them and enjoy them, because like,
me too.
If you know, it's awesome when you find a diamond in a rough, but it's like finding that diamond can sometimes be hard. But like, I hope people know that there are diamonds in there.
Yes,
they should
exactly.
be looking. If that's their thing, if they're into romance,
yes.
then
Or if you want more from your favorite show, book, anything like that. If you're looking for something more, sometimes returning to that you can kind of still, instead of rereading the books 100 times, you can still kind of get that same vibe, but reading something new in that world.
Yes,
which is something that's something that I always liked about fanfic, was getting to have a little bit more of that without having to kind of reread the plots. You know, you'd already memorized pretty much for how many times you've read it before.
Right. You don't have to wait like 6 years for the next movie.
Exactly.
If there is a next movie. Like if you're a Star Wars fan, I mean, many years. Well, no, they've been churning out stuff more frequently.
They've been doing much better. Things like the probably closer to the Game of Thrones worlds, where your books are not coming out as
was it
as
over
quickly
10
as
years?
other authors. Yes.
Yeah. So, yeah, I'm sure there's quite a bit of Game of Thrones. That would be interesting, how, because like a lot of the it's not my Game of Thrones is a little bit too dark. It's not my thing. I tried reading the first book and it's I don't do grimdark, and it is very grimdark.
Fair enough. Game of Thrones is a series that I was never really fully got into. There's a lot more description and exposition than I'm used to. It's definitely more on I think that kind of the adult fantasy side is a lot heavier into the deep dives into the lore and stuff. And while I like a good like detailed world building, I'm not as good with the heavier exposition reading. So that's part of the reason I write YA, and to some extent new adult as well, is because I want to merge some of that kind of that heavier subject matter with a little bit more, I guess a little more animation in my exposition. At least I hope so.
I would disagree. Like Game of Thrones is not reflective of adult fantasy, like
I read
especially not indie fantasy.
Certainly not indie fantasy. I've not read nearly enough adult indie fantasy. There are certain it wasn't just talking about Game of Thrones is like the ultimate example. I have tried a few other in adult.
I definitely am on the less exposition side of adult fantascy.
Okay, well that's good to know.
I like action. I like things to move. And
I definitely want to try something. I'm try reading something like that. Then I'll definitely have to check out your books, because on the trad adult fantasy side, I have not yet been able to find something that captures my imagination and attention in the same way that my young adult and new adult genres do. I'm definitely not
read Martha Wells. That's all I'm gonna say.
I have not there. So I definitely don't have as much experience in that world as I would like. If I ever get out of my mountain of graduate
You're missing all of the R.A. Salvatore books, all the D&D inspired fantasy, because they move
for sure. Yeah, yes.
We have quest. We go. There's some grass. It sparkled. Yes. Let me shoot this. Like it's very much not like the Deathgate cycle is one of my favorite.
I am totally open
to
giving some of those series a try. I get distracted by my YA section, and I'm in the bookstore with like a stack that's taller, like above my head. The retailers usually come around and are like, do you want a basket? And I'm just like, I'm really trying not to get a basket, so I get a basket, then I'll just fill it more. So I limit myself to I never walk out with that many. I want that many, and so I carry it, and then I par it down to like, the 3 that I can get on that shopping trip.
Oh, wow.
So
I'm an audiobook listener, so I don't go to the bookstore. But that's cool. That's really cool that you're going there and picking up stacks of books.
yes. Can't do it any other way.
Yeah. No, this has been awesome. Is there anything you want to say about the topics that we've kind of roamed around a bit?
I think that's what I've got to share. I've loved all the questions. I love being able to dive into kind of the little details of the world, a lot of which I always try to weave a lot of that into the stories themselves.
Yeah,
but there's always like that. There's always those extra things that don't make it in.
Well, I mean, you can tell us about them if I've got some more time. If there's some cool corners that you want to tell us about.
Well, something that I definitely will mention now that I've thought about it is that to kind of catch some of those details that didn't make it directly into the story, I have put out within the last, I want to say maybe the last 6 months to a year, I put out world building profiles on each of the 12 noble houses that kind of gives an overview of kind of the political leaders, kind of their the names, the noble family, what alliance they're in, kind of the nearby geographical features, and some sort of cultural notes that kind of didn't make it into the story. So those are on my website. That's something that I love to share with people. I also have Pinterest boards for each of the houses, because I was so into the world building. I wrote out so many different layers, like the economic system. I have documents for that, all the different what different products cost, and what how does having a magical item change the price of a regular item, things like that. So in terms of the super minute details, there are way too many for me to try to figure out which of them are my favorites to go into. What I will say, though, is that I think my favorite noble house across all 12 is the House of the Evening. That's the one that I wrote to be it's very much my style. That noble house is focused on the kind of the culture of the nightlife. It is has some of the best, the best wine, makes the best wine in the realm, and focuses on music and the arts. You can hear live music playing out of every restaurant and every tavern, every inn in the house at night. And I picture that as like, the little string lights that kind of hang over the street and kind of wind your way through, where the whole side of the mountain is lit up, and you just hear the music pouring out of every window, with all these little fairy lights just glowing under the light of the moon. That's one of my favorite images to have written. And so that's the one that I identify with the most.
So that's interesting. So you said in the houses there are taverns. So then what is the house?
So the house refers to, the noble house essentially referred to the it's kind of like the leadership. It's essentially the name of the leadership, that when the house of the day is essentially the whole town, the whole landscape is associated under a particular noble family, is essentially what that is.
Okay.
So it's more of a political designation than it is. It's not a physical building. It's more a political designation.
Okay. That's what I was wondering, because it was like, how did they have a tavern inside a house? That's interesting. But now it makes sense. If it's a designated area, and you would have different buildings and stuff. That makes total sense. That wasn't how I was picturing it. That's why I asked.
Oh, it's totally fine.
Any other cool corners you want to talk about while we're here?
Let's see. like I've mentioned before, I tried throughout the series to put the readers in every house that I possibly could, and getting some sort of visual in that space. I really like to move people through the worlds in making sure they orient themselves to a location like they're standing in it themselves. So, if you're, you're looking, you check out some of the world building profiles. I don't believe any of the world building profiles have any spoilers in them. So you can always check those out and see more about the world before you even start the series. But I really one of the things that I really liked being able to do was pick each of the houses is very much built around a very specific aspect of the culture, and that ties in with, whatever element is the house is named after, essentially. So like in the House of Peace, you have these beautiful it's a very Greco-Roman style space with open temples and some of the best libraries and academic institutions in the upper realm. House of War is heavily centered around its army. They're actually almost a fully self-sufficient kingdom, where they're doing very little exporting and very little importing. They're kind of part of one of the alliances, sort of semi in name only, will show up if necessary, but they mostly keep to themselves and, function within their own community, which I think is super interesting. And then you have, the House of the Earth is the most dense agricultural space, where pretty much every village is surrounded by farmland, and it generates the most food, and much of their culture is around the growing cycles and the seasons, and once it's harvest time, the big celebrations surrounding food, that kind of thing. So the main elements of the culture in each house were very clearly defined by whatever element was the house was named after.
That's really neat.
Yeah, it was super fun to put together. I really enjoyed that process.
So that, because like you had a House of Peace and a House of yeah. So like the House of Peace, what would that be like centered around?
So that
like peace is like a kind of a concept.
Yes, that was why I decided to send that more about this idea of openness and coexistence, where you had these open air temples that people were moving through, these academic centers that people were coming together to learn new ideas and exchange ideas. A heavy focus on intellect and knowledge, and the way that the different ways that people learn and people join together. The House of Peace also hosts a certain alliance related events, or some of the whole upper realm events, where all 12 houses are in the same space at the same time, things like that.
So you said there's a temple. So are they worshiping like a higher power, or?
That's the it's not quite a specific kind of organized religion. But a lot of the Fae feel very strongly bonded to what they call the Lady. If you heard me say in the first chapter, I said, thank the Lady that this would happen, or this would occur, or I hope let the Lady guide my brother to the afterlife. The Lady is known as there's a lot of lore surrounding her, and she was one of the founders of one of the main political founders of the Upper Realm, when the land was united, where one family ruled over the entire Upper Realm, and she ends up splitting her children come into conflict over the land. I don't want to give too much away, because it's part of the lore that is very important in I believe in book 1 as well. There we get a good solid explanation of that. But her sons and daughters end up feuding over, how the Upper Realm should be ran over. And it's said that the Lady gave up her magic and her soul to split both the power and the land among her children, in order to prevent pretty much the entire realm from caving in and from ceasing to exist. So that's why there's you pray to the Lady, or you ask the Lady for guidance, and it's more of a spiritual thing than it is a specific than it is a, I guess, organized religion type thing.
So do they actually believe that the Lady is still in existing in some way that she can hear this and influence
Yes.
things.
There is a little bit of that. It's more that it's kind of that calling for strength type thing. It's unclear whether I would say the majority don't believe that she's like able to have a hand in like every little thing, but they do believe that there are moments that there, you know, that bit of extra magic or that bit of extra light that comes from someone as powerful as the lady was could influence, you know, something major happening, you know, in their lives. So people just, you know, ask it for small things sometimes, but in terms of like the true belief, it's usually called for it's kind of one of those things that people say as you know, it's a gratitude thing to other people, it's a sign of respect, it's a, you know, I'm thinking of you type thing. You know, I hope that these things work out because I'm invoking the lady to hope that these things work out for you. You know, whatever you're having trouble with, that kind of a thing.
I see. That's really neat.
Thank you.
That's cool. So thank you so much for coming on, and we'll have the links. I think I saw your website was
Everything's linked. Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't. And your Pinterest is in your link tree. So all the links will be in the show notes or the descriptions if you want to check out the profiles or the Pinterest boards or sign up for her newsletter. There's also the book link. Hint.
Yes. First, Chasing Fae is free on most ebook retailers. So if you want to give it a test, it's very low barrier of entry.
Yeah, even better. So check it out. And thank you, Cady. So we've had Cady Hammer here today, and we were talking about Chasing Fae and many other things. And I have been your host, Melinda Kucsera, and this has been another episode of Fantasy Lore and More. So make sure to like, follow, share all the things so that you are notified next time that we are here, and of course let your friends know about the show so more people find out about Cady and all of our awesome authors who have come on the show. And have a great day or great night wherever you are, and we'll be back with another fantasy book, another fantasy author next week. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.